Welcome back. This is our Wheel of Time, Episode 2, Shadows Waiting, Reaction and Analysis. The last video ran a little long, so we're going to try to get through this one in under 20 minutes just to keep it on message and not let me ramble too much. It starts out with what I thought was a very strong introduction trailer where Eamon Valda, an inquisitor for the Children of Light, the White Cloaks, played by Abdul Salas. I'm going to try to start getting these actors' names. He is having a meal in his pavilion, and while torturing and ultimately executing an Aes Sedai. They've cut off her hands and they're burning her alive, and he has a little gloat session with her, and he's carrying rings around on his belt as a trophy. The White Cloaks definitely are a military power at a time where there aren't as many standing armies for the nations. In the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church had its own armies, and while there was always a power struggle between the kingdoms of medieval Europe and the Catholic Church, it really depended. It was always settled by who had the bigger army. Most of the nations, at least in southern Randland, have not seen war since the Ale War. There was also a White Cloak War that I don't know. I think it was around the time of the Ale War. It was either before or after it. If I'm correct, Tam Thor fought in both the White Cloak War and the Ale War. But that was 20 years ago, and there has not been much conflict since, and most of these nations don't have armies, the exception being the Borderlands, where you notice we don't see a lot of the White Cloaks because the Borderlanders won't tolerate them. It's in these southern kingdoms. Thing to keep in mind is that this world is very much in decline, and the different population centers are isolated. There's a lot of empty space in Randland right now. So when that happens, in nation states or land masses in our own world, organizations like the White Cloaks can spring up and take over in a power vacuum. I'll bring up an example from our own world, the Islamic State, or Daesh, in Syria and Iraq. Kind of sprung up overnight in territory that just wasn't controlled by unstable centralized governments in Baghdad and Damascus. Allowed this group of religious fanatics to take over a large part of both of those countries, and had to be rooted out by armies from other nations, and are still active in places like Afghanistan, but no real world politics in the Wheel of Time. The Eamon Valda, love that we're getting a villain that's not a monster or a fade, just an evil man, and I'll leave it at that. The next scene is the first time we see the introduction credits, which is very much of the age lace being weaved on a loom. And what I kind of took away from this is the tapestries that you will see in the White Tower. And I think we're going to hear a lot about how corrupt and decadent the Aes Sedai have become as the dominant faction in this world, being in Randland, the continent, being the only group that can wield the one power that we know about at this point in the series, but certainly the big gun. And these women we see in the tapestries, they're very proud. They're very ornamental. I'm sure these are a bunch of Amerlin seats, and I think we've got all the colors of the Aja here, except for one, and we'll see how they handle that as the show moves on. But it's a beautiful sequence, had some great music. I enjoyed it, and I like the choice of doing it as a tapestry and an Aes Sedai tapestry because I think it again it tells us it shows us a lot without having to tell us a lot. So we're fleeing the two rivers. Trollocs and Fades are hot on our trail, and we get to Tarn Ferry, and the ferryman is waiting for his son to show up before he'll take our heroes across, and Moiraine insists that he do it now. And then as they get across the water, the Trollocs show up, and when they get to the other side, the the ferryman, I should say, he wants to take his ferry back. Moiraine won't let him. She has Lan cut the rope of the ferry, and then she does a weave that creates a whirlwind. The man dumps in the water and drowns, and all the children are horrified at, how cold-blooded this Aes Sedai Moiraine is, and how she sacrificed that man, without a second thought. And again, we're getting chapters and chapters of friction between the Aes Sedai and the regular folk in one scene. We're establishing that, yes, Moiraine is here to help, but you may not want her help, which we could do a whole video on, the idea of just because you can do a thing, must you do that thing? And just because you think you're on a path of destiny, there are going to be consequences that might not be good consequences. And the children have a discussion, or the image fielders have a discussion about this, and they're conflicted because they seemed like they chose to come with Moiraine very quickly. And given that we found out that Perrin has a wife and Mat is kind of more responsible for his sisters in the show than he is in the books, what's going to happen to all the people that they've left behind? And I mean, and I have not yet looked, but I don't think we ever had a scene where Tam gave Rand his sword. I'll have to see if he's wearing it. I meant to check that before the video. So, but we're trying to move things along without getting bogged down in the length of these novels. Also, just want to kind of point out that their camp seems to be in some kind of ruin again that suggests, this is a fallen world. This is a world that once had high sophisticated technology that now is more egalitarian. Is that the word for farmer based? So Moiraine comes out and, if you don't like my methods, something like that, I'm trying to save your neck. And I think they have dreams. Oh yeah, no, she wins over Egwene because she's like, well, what would you have had me do with that ferryman? If I'd sent him back, what would happen? Egwene's like, oh, the Trollocs would have come over and killed us all, and the adventure would be over. And that's right. So she wins Egwene over, and Egwene goes back for some snuggles with Rand. And I just wanted to point out that there's a little bit of like our the symbol of the Aes Sedai with the sort of yin yang symbol and how their faces and how Egwene has a darker complexion and Rand is a soulless ginger. I don't know if that was deliberate, but I picked that up. And he kind of kicks her out of bed and says, "Go sleep somewhere else," which I think is meant to suggest how women are a little more dominant in this world. And, it's whereas in our world at this time, in a sort of a farming, kind of puritanical society, maybe women wouldn't just be, I'm going to sleep with you tonight. But in Randland, they can. And it's, and Rand has the headache. Is basically what I'm saying. Then I think he has a dream. No, he has another. Oh, that's right. There's a later. I took that screenshot later. There we go. He has a dream. He coughs up a bat, and a figure with glowing red eyes shows up. Fans of the series will know that is Balazamon, and I'm not going to say anything more about him. But great to see this. Great, this is right out of the books. This is really important stuff, and I haven't talked too much about Rand, and I'm going to kind of stick to that rule. But there's a lot coming for him, and it's fun stuff, and I can't wait to see it. So I think they wake up and have the conversation about the dreams, and then we Rand is agitated in that this episode, and kind of like how I talked about, we're seeing more of what Matt and Perrin are going to become. We're also seeing, what Rand is going to become in the later books. So Moraine and Lan ride off, and they know that the Emond's Fielders are going to follow them because they don't really have a choice. They run into some White Cloaks. This is Geoffrey Bornhold, who was played by an actor named Stuart Graham. And he's the good cop, and Eamon Valda is the bad cop. They encounter Moraine. Now, here is where we have a bit of an issue, because without her hood up, Moraine is recognizable as an Aes Sedai. And so the White Cloaks, because she has the ageless face. Now, no one really knows kind of what an ageless face looks like. Robert Jordan describes it as smooth. So I've always sort of imagined it's a woman who's older but still, doesn't have any wrinkles, I guess. But it's described as being very distinctive. Moraine certainly has the ageless look. White Cloaks would recognize her without having to, just because she takes off her ring. Eamon Valda would be like, nope, that's an Aes Sedai. Cut her hands off and tie her to a stake. I do want to say that just because you take off a channeler's hands doesn't mean they can't still channel, at least in the books. I like the costumes. I'm not sure how useful just having some scale armor on one shoulder is if you're going to ride into battle. I mean, I guess it's on the left side. So I guess it's your shield arm. I think it's more for stylistic than actual function. We don't get a ton of time with Gia from Bornhold. He rides off to go fight Trollocs, presumably, and Eamon Valda says he has some business in the south, and we'll find out what that business is later. Moraine also dances around the three oaths. The first oath being to speak no word that isn't true, and Egwene's she kind of obviously does it, and I've got some issues with this episode. She kind of obviously does it when she's being questioned by Eamon Valda, and he should have seen right through her. But I think it was more they're really trying to establish things right now rather than beat us over the head with continuity. But she's like, "Oh, I didn't lie. I just, you heard a truth, just not the truth that you thought you'd heard," something like that. And also, in an earlier scene when Egwene and Moraine are talking, Egwene mentions Arthur Hawkwing and says the three oaths come from the promises the Aes Sedai made to get him to stop laying siege to the White Tower. If I recall correctly, the three oaths are older than Arthur Hawkwing, and they actually came out of the breaking rather than the Empire of Arthur Hawkwing or Arthur. Anyway, so that was cool to hear. I'm glad we're getting some of the backstory to this incredible world. They sing a song of Manetheren, and Moraine tells them the story of the fall of Manetheren. It's a pretty song. It's a sad song. They also ride under a ruined bridge, and they're about to ride to Shadar Logoth. And just again, more exposition as to they're living in a world of ruins. I do think they're rushing things a little bit here, but there's a lot to cover, and there's a lot that the Emets Fielders are finding out while this is all going on in the dialogue in the books, and we just don't have time in a 15-minute show to go through all of that. I think I got a few scenes out of order here, but not by much. There's two things I want to talk about before we get to Shadar Logoth. One is, Rand is extremely angsty this entire episode, which I do have a bit of an issue with because it seemed like in the last episode while he wasn't happy that Egwene was not going to marry him and instead become the Wisdom's apprentice, he had made his peace with it. They hugged it out, and now he's being a moody bitch about it. So, and then again at the end, but by the end of the episode, he's fine. So it's maybe a lack of business for these two to do. They want the personal problems are what keep people watching the show. So they want these guys to have some drama between them. We'll see. I don't know if this is going to continue to be a plot. I mean, I guess they're going in their separate directions, and they're not going to see each other for a while by the end of this episode. So this might just have been, yes, these two are close, but things are problematic right now. And then these guys show up and try to recruit Perrin to be a furry. And he's not ready to be a furry yet. So, he tells them to fuck off. But I'm kidding. The wolves show up. And, for farmers in the wilderness, these are monsters. These are very dangerous. And, I mean, even if you were in the Alaskan wilderness right now and 10 wolves showed up, you're going to get eaten by those wolves. But instead they lick the cut on his leg, that he's been walking around without any bandages on it in a world without antiseptic. So he would definitely be losing that leg. And he has a healer in the group. Don't ask. There's a lot of things. I have some issues with this episode, as I've said. So yeah, that's sort of a summary of what happens before they get to Shadar Logoth, and I want to talk a little bit about Shadar Logoth, and then I want to close this episode out. So, beautiful is all I have to say. Dark, ruined, clearly distinctive in its design, unlike anything we've seen so far. As I said in the last video, I like that at least we're getting some very strong visuals. And I specifically noted that several of the visuals really look like they were inspired heavily by the covers, particularly this one. And I'll grab the Crown of Swords and Fires of Heaven still so you can see them juxtaposed with this one, because this is what, for years, all we got for visuals were the Daryl K. Sweet covers, which I love. They maybe are a little bit dated, but there's a lot of Rand standing around in these huge empty cities, and a lot happens in Shadar Logoth. So I'm glad that they spent some time really establishing this place as a real place in a real world. And at this point, they're on the run from Trollocs. Moraine has taken a wound. She's not conscious. Lan has made the choice to go into Shadar Logoth because the Trollocs won't go in there. There's a bunch of stuff that happens. The main takeaway is that Mat gets the ruby dagger, and the party splits. Egwene and Perrin go one way, Mat and Rand go another way, and Lan and Moraine go a third way. So after really 2 episodes where we stayed with the main group, we are now branching off into a fragmented narrative where we will be following, presumably, each group on their own adventure until I think they all get back together again in Camlin towards the climax of Eye of the World. So they've opened it up in the next episode, which I haven't seen yet. They've opened the world up, and we're going to see a lot of different aspects of the world. And at the end of the episode, Nineveh shows up and gets the drop on Lan, and we're probably going to start seeing some of their interaction. I have some issues with this episode. I don't feel like it was as strong of an episode as the first episode. I'm still going to hold judgment. I understand that there's a lot of information that they're trying to convey in a short amount of time. However, we do need some time, and it's a big cast. And they've completely omitted Tom Maryland from the plot at this point. We've barely met Padan Fain. There's a bunch of other characters that we never met in the Two Rivers. However, that's not for me to say, oh, well, where's my favorite character? I'm just concerned that we need some time with each of these characters to get to know them a little bit better so that we start to sympathize with them. And that's what will connect the audience to the show and make it great instead of just good. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. We will have the third episode analysis up in a few days, and then we'll have episode 4 when it comes out next week. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.